Let me ask you something. What happens when you stop texting first? What happens when you stop explaining yourself? What happens when you go completely silent? See, most people are afraid of silence. They think if they stop talking, stop reaching out, stop trying, they'll lose the person they care about. But what if I told you, silence doesn't make you lose the right person. Silence exposes the wrong one. Because the moment you go quiet, you're no longer convincing, chasing, or reminding someone of your worth. You're giving them space to show you theirs. And that's where the truth begins. Because a man's real intentions don't show up when you're doing all the work. They show up when you stop, when you step back and stop reaching out. Something powerful begins to happen. Clarity enters the situation in a way that words never could. Before that moment, everything is clouded by effort. You're texting, calling, checking in, trying to keep the connection alive. And while you're doing all of that, it feels like something is happening, like the relationship is moving. But in reality, you might just be the one carrying the entire weight of it. When you remove your presence, something shifts in a way most people don't expect. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's subtle, but it's powerful. Because when you're always there, consistently showing up, giving attention, checking in, being available, your presence becomes familiar. And while familiarity can feel comforting, it can also lead to something dangerous, being taken for granted, not intentionally, not always consciously, but it happens. People adjust to what's always there. They start to expect it. And once something becomes expected, it loses the sense of urgency it once had. It no longer feels like something that could be lost. It feels like something that will always be there, no matter what. That's where your silence changes everything. Because the moment you step back, the moment your messages stop, your attention fades, and your energy is no longer directed toward him, that sense of certainty disappears. And in its place, something else begins to grow. Awareness. Now he notices the difference. Not because you said anything, not because you argued or demanded change, but because your absence created a contrast. And contrast is powerful. It's what makes people truly see what they had, instead of just experiencing it passively. Before, your presence was part of his routine. Now it's missing, and missing. Things have a way of making people think. He starts to replay moments in his mind, conversations, interactions, the way you showed up, the way you cared, the consistency you brought. Things he may have overlooked before suddenly become clearer, more significant. Because here's the truth, people often don't fully recognize value while they're constantly receiving it. It's when that value is no longer available that it becomes real. Your silence removes the constant supply of attention, and now he has to sit with the absence of it, and that absence creates questions. Why did she stop? Did I do something wrong? Is she moving on? And those questions lead to something deeper: reflection. For the first time, he's not just experiencing you, he's thinking about you. And thinking leads to realization. Realization of your consistency. Realization of your effort. Realization of how much space you actually occupied in his life. Because when something is gone, the space it leaves behind becomes visible. Now, this doesn't mean every man will suddenly have a complete transformation. Some will feel that absence and choose to ignore it. Some will distract themselves, avoid thinking too deeply, or simply let things fade. But a man who has genuine feelings, who truly values connection, who sees something meaningful with you, he won't be able to ignore that shift so easily. Your silence will sit with him. It will stay in the back of his mind because it disrupted something he had grown comfortable with, and comfort, once removed, creates a desire to restore what was lost. That's when you may start to see effort, not forced effort, not surface level attention, but real intentional action. He reaches out not because he's bored, but because he felt your absence. He wants to reconnect, understand, and rebuild that connection. And here's what makes this so important. This awareness didn't come from you convincing him. It didn't come from long explanations, emotional conversations, or trying to prove your worth. It came from your absence. That's what makes it real. Because anything someone realizes on their own tends to be stronger, more lasting, and more genuine than something they were talked into understanding. But there's another side to this that you need to understand just as clearly. Sometimes your absence creates awareness not in him, but in you. Because when you step back, you don't just see how he reacts. You also see how you feel. You begin to notice how much energy you were investing, how often you were thinking about him, how much of your time and emotional space was tied to someone who may not have been giving you the same in return. And that awareness is just as powerful because now it's not just about whether he misses you, it's about whether you've been selling for less than you deserve. Silence gives you that space to reflect without distraction, without constant interaction pulling you back in, without emotional highs and lows clouding your judgment. It allows you to see things as they are, not as you hoped they would be. And that clarity can change everything because once you become aware of your own patterns, your own value, your own boundaries, you don't move the same way anymore. You don't overgive as easily. You don't chase as quickly. You don't ignore red flags just to keep someone around. So yes, your absence creates awareness for him, but more importantly, it creates awareness for you. It shows you whether he truly values your presence or just got used to it. And once that awareness is there, you're no longer operating from confusion. You're operating from truth. See, constant communication can create an illusion. It can make you believe that there's mutual interest, mutual effort, mutual care. But if you take an honest look at it, you might realize that you're often the one initiating conversations, asking questions, keeping things going. And as long as you continue doing that, there's no real pressure on him to show up differently. There's no real test of his intentions. The moment you go silent, that illusion disappears. Now there's space, real space. And in that space, his true intentions have nowhere to hide. Because if a man genuinely values you, if he truly enjoys your presence and sees something meaningful with you, he won't just sit back and let you disappear without question. He won't be comfortable with that distance. Your absence will feel different to him, noticeable, even unsettling. And that feeling will push him to act. He'll reach out, not out of obligation, but because he wants to. He'll check in, not because he has to, but because your silence made him realize that something important might be slipping away. His actions will become clearer, more intentional, and more consistent. Not perfect, but real. On the other hand, if his intentions were never strong to begin with, your silence will reveal that just as clearly. There won't be effort. There won't be curiosity. There won't be that sense of urgency to reconnect. Instead, There will be distance, and this more distance. And while that might hurt at first, it's actually doing you a favor. Because now you're no longer guessing, you're no longer overanalyzing messages, wondering what he meant, or trying to decode mixed signals. Silence removes the confusion and replaces it with truth. It answers the question you've been trying to figure out all along. Does he really care, or am I just convenient? And here's the important part. This isn't about testing someone in a manipulative way. It's not about playing games or trying to force a reaction. It's about stepping out of a pattern where you've been overextending yourself and allowing the other person the opportunity to meet you halfway. Too often, people are afraid to do this because they think, what if he doesn't reach out? But that fear is exactly what keeps you stuck in situations where you're giving more than you're receiving. It keeps you holding on to potential instead of reality. The truth is, if someone only shows interest when you're the one initiating, then what you have isn't balanced. It's not mutual. And no amount of extra effort on your part can turn one-sided energy into something genuine. When you go silent, you're not losing control. You're gaining perspective. You begin to see patterns more clearly. You notice whether he steps forward or fades back. You start to understand whether his words ever matched his actions. And most importantly, you begin to see your own value in a different light. Because when you stop overgiving, you realize just how much you were bringing to the table all along. And that realization changes you. It makes you less willing to accept inconsistency. It makes you less tolerant of confusion. It makes you stronger in your standards. Because now you've seen what happens when you remove your energy. You've seen the truth. Some people will rise to meet that space. They'll show effort, consistency, and genuine interest. Others will fall away quietly, without resistance. And while it might feel disappointing when someone falls away, it's actually one of the most honest outcomes you can get. Because it saves you time, energy, and emotional investment that would have been wasted trying to build something with someone who was never fully there. So silence becomes a filter. It separates words from actions. It separates interest from convenience. It separates those who truly value you from those who were just enjoying the access you gave them. And once you see that clearly, you can't unsee it. You stop chasing answers because you already have them. You stop forcing connections because you understand that the right ones don't need to be forced. And you stop doubting your worth because you realize that the right person won't need constant reminders to recognize it. In the end, silence doesn't create truth, it reveals it. When you pull your energy back, the entire dynamic between you and him begins to shift, whether he realizes it immediately or not. Before that moment, the balance may not have been equal. You might have been the one initiating more, giving more, thinking more, caring more. And when one person consistently invests more energy than the other, it quietly creates an imbalance of power. Not power in a controlling or manipulative sense, but in terms of emotional influence. The one who gives more often ends up feeling more anxious, more uncertain, more affected by the other person's actions. Meanwhile, the one who gives less can remain more relaxed, more detached, more in control of the pace and direction of the connection. That's the dynamic most people find themselves in without even realizing it. And the reason it continues is simple. Nothing interrupts it. As long as you keep showing up the same way, the pattern stays intact. He doesn't have to adjust because there's no reason to. The energy you're providing keeps everything going, even if it's not being matched. But the moment you step back, the moment you stop initiating, stop overextending, stop filling in the gaps, that dynamic can no longer stay the same because now the flow of energy has changed. Where there was once constant effort, there is now space. Where there was once certainty, there is now unpredictability. And that shift naturally forces a response, whether it's immediate or delayed. This is where the balance begins to recalibrate. Because when you're no longer the one holding everything together, he is faced with a choice. Either he steps forward to meet that space, or he allows the connection to drift. And that choice is powerful because it reveals his level of investment without you having to ask for it. You're no longer trying to convince him to care. You're no longer explaining what you need or hoping he understands. Instead, you're allowing his actions to speak for him, and actions, when they come without pressure, tend to be far more honest. Now, when the energy shifts like this, it can feel uncomfortable at first, especially for you, because if you're used to being the one who reaches out, being the one who keeps things alive, stepping back can feel unnatural. It can make you question yourself. You might feel the urge to break the silence, to go back to what feels familiar. But that discomfort is part of the change. It's you breaking out of a pattern where you were over-functioning in the connection. And on the other side of that discomfort is clarity, because now, instead of guessing how he feels, you get to observe what he does when you're no longer doing everything. If he steps forward, if he matches your energy, if he begins to invest in a way he didn't before, that tells you something meaningful. It tells you that he's capable of showing up, that he just needed the space to do so. But if he doesn't, if he stays distant, inconsistent, or passive, that tells you something just as important. It tells you that the connection was being sustained more by your effort than by his. And that's not something you can fix by giving more. That's something you can only see clearly when you give less. This shift in energy also changes how you see yourself, because when you're no longer constantly giving, you start to recognize your own value in a different way. You realize that your attention, your time, your emotional investment, those are not small things. They are meaningful, and they should be reciprocated. You begin to understand that you were never too much. You were just giving too much to someone who wasn't meeting you at the same level. And that realization strengthens your standards. It makes you less willing to accept imbalance, less willing to chase clarity, less willing to stay in situations where your energy isn't respected. So the shift isn't just happening in him, it's happening in you. You're moving from a place of seeking validation to a place of observing behavior, from trying to make something work to allowing it to reveal whether it works at all. And that's where real power comes in. Not in controlling the outcome, not in making someone act a certain way, but in creating enough space for the truth to show itself, because when the energy is balanced, effort flows naturally from both sides. There's no confusion, no constant questioning, no feeling like you have to earn someone's attention, but when it's unbalanced, it feels heavy, one-sided, draining. And the only way to truly see that difference is to change your own level of investment. Pulling your energy back is not about playing games. It's about restoring balance. It's about giving the connection a chance to either stand on its own or fall apart without your constant support. And whatever happens after that, that's your answer. There's a part of this that most people don't want to accept at first because it challenges what they've been hoping for. You go silent, you pull your energy back, and deep down you expect a certain reaction. You expect him to notice, to reach out, to realize what he lost, and come back with more effort, more clarity, more intention. And sometimes that happens, but sometimes it doesn't. And that's where the real lesson begins, because silence is not just about attracting someone back into your life. It's about revealing who was never truly there in the first place. When a man doesn't respond to your silence, it can feel personal. It can make you question yourself. You might wonder if you didn't matter enough, if you should have done more, said more, tried harder. But the truth is, his lack of response is not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his level of investment. See, when someone genuinely values you, when they feel a real connection, when your presence means something to them, they don't just let you disappear without question. They don't ignore the distance like it doesn't matter. Your absence creates a reaction in them because you created an impact, but when there's no reaction, that tells you something just as clearly. It tells you that what you were feeling, what you were building in your mind, may not have been equally felt on the other side. And as difficult as that realization can be, it's also freeing, because now you're no longer holding on to potential. You're facing reality. And reality, even when it's uncomfortable, is always more valuable than false hope. A lot of people stay stuck because they keep trying to revive something that only existed in moments, not in consistency. They hold on to the good conversations, the occasional attention, the brief glimpses of what felt like something real. But consistency is what defines truth. Not occasional effort, not temporary interest, not words without follow-through. So when your silence is met with more silence, it's not the end of something meaningful, it's the confirmation that there wasn't enough there to sustain it. And that's not something to chase, that's something to accept. Because think about it. Why would you want someone who only shows interest when you're the one keeping the connection alive? Why would you want to be in a situation where your presence is only valued when it's convenient, when it's easy, when it requires nothing from the other person? That's not connection. That's access. And you deserve more than being someone's option. You deserve to be someone's priority. Silence helps you see the difference. It separates the people who were simply enjoying your attention from the ones who genuinely value you as a person. And once you see that difference, you can't unsee it. You start to understand that not everyone is meant to stay in your life, and that's not a failure. That's alignment, because every person who falls away creates space for someone who is actually capable of meeting you where you are, but that space only opens when you stop holding on to the wrong people. That's why silence is so powerful. It forces movement. Either the other person steps forward or they step out. Either way, you gain clarity. And clarity is what protects your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. Now, this doesn't mean it won't hurt. Letting go of what you hoped something could become is never easy. There's always a part of you that wants things to turn out differently. A part of you that remembers the moments that felt good and wonders if they could come back. But you have to ask yourself an honest question. Do you want moments or do you want consistency? Because those are not the same thing. Moments can be created by anyone. Anyone can show up temporarily, say the right things, make you feel something in the moment. But consistency, that requires intention. That requires effort. That requires someone choosing you, not just when it's easy, but over and over again. And if someone isn't doing that, your silence didn't push them away. It simply stopped you from holding them in place. That's an important distinction. You didn't lose them. You released them. And there's strength in that, because it means you're no longer forcing something that isn't naturally choosing you. You're no longer investing in a connection that doesn't invest back. You're no longer ignoring reality just to hold on to possibility. Instead, you're choosing alignment over attachment. You're choosing truth over comfort. And most importantly, you're choosing yourself. So when silence leads to distance, don't see it as rejection. See it as direction, a clear sign pointing you away from what isn't meant for you and towards something that is. Because the right person won't need your silence to realize your value. They'll recognize it while you're still there, and they'll make sure you feel it without you ever having to question it. So at the end of the day, understand this: